told him we weren't coming.
He didn't need that. He was asking for us, not at the end.
The shovel hit the frozen earth with a metallic clink that echoed through the empty cemetery. 4 months. That's how long my dad had been under this soil. We didn't find out from a phone call or a lawyer. We found out because my middle sister went to leave flowers for our mom and saw the fresh mound beside her. While I was leaving him voicemails, he was already gone. While my sisters were sending get well cards, his second wife was already selling our childhood home. I have his will in my pocket, a document that says we inherit everything. But 3 attorneys just told me it's a useless piece of paper. They took his house, his money, and his final breaths. Now I'm taking back the truth. Look at who's sitting next to you right now. If you're with someone you trust, hold on. If you're by yourself, pay close attention. I'm about to show you the digital trail they forgot to scrub and why your family might be next. Are you here alone? Let me know in the comments. Now let's dive in. I remember the smell of my dad's garage, sawdust, motor oil, and that old school peppermint gum he always chewed. He was a man of the old guard, a retired engineer who believed that if a job was worth doing, it was worth doing right. That was the man who raised us. That was the man who sat the 3 of us down a decade ago, his hands steady on the kitchen table, and showed us his will. "I've taken care of you kids," he'd said, his voice as solid as a foundation. "This house stays in the family. The investments are split 3 ways. Your mom would have wanted you to have a head start. We believed him, because you don't doubt a man like that. But foundations don't always crumble all at once. Sometimes they rot from the inside, where you can't see the damage until the roof falls in." It started with the silence. When he married his second wife, the weekly Sunday dinners stopped. Then the phone calls started getting shorter. Eventually, we couldn't even get him on the line. We had to go through her or my half-sister, which is her daughter. "Your dad is resting?" My dad's second wife would say, her voice as polished and cold as a new countertop. "The doctors say he needs 0 stress, no visitors this weekend. Maybe next month." We were the good kids. We didn't want to cause trouble or agitate his heart condition. We stayed in our lanes, sending fruit baskets that were never mentioned, and leaving messages that felt like they were being shouted into a deep, dark well. We lived in a state of waiting, expecting the all clear that never came. The day we found out the truth was a Tuesday. My younger sister called me, her voice shaking so hard she was gasping for air. She had gone to the local cemetery to leave lilies for our mom's birthday. "He's there," she whispered. "There's a new stone, Anderson. It has Dad's name. It says he died in August." August. It was now December. The world didn't just stop. It felt like it went into reverse. I remember driving to that cemetery. The heater in my truck maxed out, but my skin felt like a sheet of ice. When I saw the dirt, the fresh, sunken mound beside our mom, I felt a physical punch to my gut. He had been gone for 4 months. In those 120 days, I had called his cell phone at least a dozen times. I had sent a thinking of you card for Father's Day. I had lived a life where my dad was still fighting, while in reality, he was already part of the earth. We go to the one place we thought was safe, only to find the locks changed by strangers. We drove straight to our childhood home. The white Victorian with the wraparound porch where I learned to swing a hammer. The porch light was off. The lawn was manicured, but it looked hollow. I knocked on the door, my heart hammering like a trapped bird. A stranger answered. A guy in his 20s, holding a gaming controller. "Can I help you?" he asked, looking confused. "I'm looking for my dad," I said, my voice cracking. "This is Anderson House." The kid looked at me with a mix of confusion and pity. "Man, I bought this place 5 years ago. From a woman named Tiffany. There hasn't been an Anderson living here since the Obama administration. 5 years. My dad was alive 5 years ago. He was supposedly living there. Every time we talked to the R half-sister, she implied he was in the backyard or sitting in his favorite recliner in that living room. The betrayal didn't start at the funeral. It started years ago. It was a slow-motion robbery, a calculated erasing of our history while we were still being told the garden was blooming. If this story is hitting home for you, hit the like button and subscribe. We're telling the stories that the lawyers say aren't worth the fight. The next morning, I took the will to the first estate lawyer I could find. A fancy office downtown with marble floors and a receptionist who didn't look up. I expected a call to arms. I expected him to be as outraged as I was. The lawyer, a guy with a silver tie and a bored expression, flipped through the 3-page will like he was reading a grocery list. "Sir," he said, leaning back, "the house was in your father's name only. He had the legal right to sell it. If he took that money and put it into a joint ownership condo with his second wife, it bypasses your inheritance entirely. It belongs to her now. As for the $155,000 in investments, if she was the named beneficiary on the account, this will is just a nice piece of souvenir paper." "But he was sick," I argued. "He wouldn't have sold that house. It was for us. Can you prove he wasn't in his right mind 5 years ago?" the lawyer asked. "Do you have medical records? Did you attend the doctor visits?" "They wouldn't let us near him," the lawyer just shrugged. "Then, in the eyes of the law, you weren't involved. It'll cost you $35,000 in fees just to start a fight you've already lost. My advice? Go home, grieve your father, and let it go." I walked out into the cold rain. Let it go? How do you let go of a house that was sold behind your back while you were still being told the roof was being repaired? How do you let go of the safety net your dad worked 40 years to build, knowing it's now being used to buy leather sofas for a condo you aren't allowed to step inside of? I realized the only way to get the truth was to go to the hospital where he spent his final days, and what the nurse told me changed everything. I spent that afternoon at the hospital. I used my ID and a lot of persistence to get to the records floor. I finally found a nurse who remembered his final weeks. "Oh, I remember him," she said, her voice dropping. "He was so quiet. He spent most of his time staring at the door." "Was his wife there?" I asked. "She and the daughter were there for the paperwork," the nurse said, but he kept asking when his other kids were coming. He had these old photos on his nightstand. "We didn't know he was even in the hospital," I said, the words feeling like salt in a wound. The nurse looked at me, genuinely shocked. "His wife told the staff you lived on the West Coast and were too busy with your own lives to come back. She told him you'd called and said you couldn't make it. He stopped asking after the 3rd week. He just gave up." The wall they built wasn't just made of silence, it was made of lies. They convinced a dying man that his children had abandoned him, and they convinced us that he didn't want to be bothered. They didn't just steal his money, they stole his heart before they let him die. There's a specific kind of silence that follows a discovery like that, a silence that rings in your ears like a gunshot. Standing in that hospital hallway, surrounded by the smell of antiseptic and the distant hum of monitors, I realized that my sisters and I hadn't just been left out of a will. We had been erased from a life. I walked out to the parking lot, my hands shaking so hard I couldn't get my keys into the ignition. I had to sit there, watching the rain smear the windshield, trying to reconcile the dad who taught me how to change a tire with the man who died thinking I was too busy to hold his hand. The second wife hadn't just moved into a condo. She had moved into his mind and redecorated the truth until there was no room left for us. I picked up my younger sister and my youngest sister that evening. We didn't go to a restaurant or a coffee shop. We sat in my truck in the driveway of a grocery store, the engine idling, because we didn't want anyone else to see the mess we were. She told the nurses we were too busy. I said, the words tasting like ash. My youngest sister, the one who always looked for the best in people, just stared out the window. "I sent him a text every single Monday," she whispered. "I told him about my promotion. I told him I missed him. I thought he was just too tired to reply." I thought she was protecting his peace. She wasn't protecting his peace. My younger sister snapped, her grief finally turning into a sharp, jagged edge. She was protecting the asset. If he talked to us, he might have remembered the promise he made to Mom. He might have asked why the house was sold. He might have realized he was being kept in a cage. We decided to stop being the good kids and drive to the address of the new condo, and what we saw in the window made the air leave my lungs. The condo was in one of those new gated developments on the edge of town, the kind of place where the grass is fake and the security guards look at you like you're a trespasser if your truck is more than 3 years old. It was a lifestyle community luxury, exclusive, and completely detached from the life my dad had lived for 60 years. We waited until dark. We didn't have a plan. We just wanted to see where our childhood had gone. We pulled up to the curb, and there it was, Unit 402. The lights were on, casting a warm, expensive glow onto the balcony. Through the sheer curtains, I saw her, my dad's second wife. She was holding a glass of wine, laughing at something on a massive television that probably cost more than my first car. Then, her daughter, my half-sister, walked into the frame. She was wearing a silk robe, draped over a designer sofa that I just knew was paid for by the equity of our family home. They weren't mourning. They weren't grieving the loss of a husband or a father. They were celebrating a closing. They looked like they had just won the lottery, and in a way, they had. They had successfully transitioned a lifetime of my dad's hard work into a high-rise fortress where his other children couldn't reach it. "That's his chair," my younger sister gasped, pointing. I looked closer. Tucked into the corner of that modern, sterile living room was my dad's old leather recliner, the one with the worn-out footrest and the faint smell of tobacco. It looked ridiculous in that room, like a piece of a sunken ship washed up on a pristine beach. It was the only thing they kept of him that wasn't liquid cash, a trophy of their victory. I need to know your honest opinion. If you saw your father's favorite chair sitting in a house bought with stolen money, would you knock on that door or would you drive away? Tell me what you would do in the comments right now. The next day, we went to the second lawyer. This one was different. A pit bull type in a strip mall office. No marble floors here, just stacks of files and a coffee machine that sounded like a jet engine. "I've seen this 100 times, he said, leaning over a desk covered in yellow legal pads. "It's called intentional isolation. They cut the lines of communication, they poison the well, and then they get the signature. By the time the body is cold, the paper trail is a labyrinth." He looked over the property records I had pulled. Here's the kicker. The house on Elm Street? It was sold in a private sale to a shell company. Your dad signed the deed over to his wife for $10 and other considerations. That's legal speak for a gift. Once she owned it, she sold it for $500,000. She took that cash and bought the condo in joint tenancy with rights of survivorship. "What does that mean in English?" my youngest sister asked. "It means," the lawyer said, "that the moment your dad's heart stopped, his share of that condo vanished into thin air. It didn't go to his estate. It didn't go to his will. It went straight to her and her daughter. They don't even have to go to court. They just show the death certificate to the county, and your names are wiped off the map." "But the investments?" I asked. "The $155,000? The lawyer laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Check the dates, Shannon. I bet you'll find those accounts were moved to a joint account 3 months before he passed. In the eyes of the bank, that money belongs to the survivor. The will only covers what a person owns individually at the time of death. If they were smart, and it sounds like they were, your dad died, owning absolutely nothing but the clothes on his back." My younger sister reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of letters we had found in a box Dad had hidden in the garage years ago, and the secret inside them proved this was a plan 30 years in the making. We went back to my garage that night. We started digging through the few boxes I had managed to grab from the house years ago when Dad first started getting sick. Tucked at the bottom of a crate of old tools was a manila envelope. Inside were letters, not from my dad, but to him. They were from the second wife's brother, dated back to the month they got married. "Don't worry about the kids," the letter read. "Once you've got the deed in both names, they won't have a leg to stand on. It's for the best, John. You need a fresh start without the baggage of the first marriage." "Baggage?" I whispered. That's what we were. We were baggage to be checked at the gate. My dad had kept these letters. Why? Maybe as a reminder. Maybe he knew even then that he was stepping into a trap but was too lonely to care. Or maybe he thought he was smarter than them. But as he got older, as the medical emergency started, the heart flutters, the dizzy spells, his strength faded, and their grip tightened, I thought about those nights he was in the hospital. The nurse said he was staring at the door. He wasn't just waiting for us. He was probably wondering why the baggage he spent his life protecting had suddenly disappeared. He died thinking we had finally moved on without him, just like the letters suggested he should. The lawyers all said the same thing. Not worth the fight. They looked at the numbers, the deeds, and the joint tenancy laws and saw a closed case. They didn't see the 4 months of silence. They didn't see the letters in the tool crate. They didn't see the man staring at a hospital door while his wife picked out new drapes for a condo he would never live to enjoy. We can't just let them win. My younger sister said, her voice a low, dangerous hum, "If the law won't help us, then we find another way. We make sure the world knows what they did. We make that condo feel like a prison." But I looked at my youngest sister. She was crying, but not for the money. She was crying because she realized that for 5 years, every "I love you" she sent to our dad was likely deleted by a half-sister before he ever saw it. We hadn't just lost an inheritance. We had lost the chance to say goodbye to a man who died thinking he was unloved. Grief is a heavy weight, but anger is a high-octane fuel. Once we realized that the silence wasn't an accident, that it was a professional-grade isolation tactic, the sadness in my gut turned into a cold, hard resolve. If the big city lawyers wouldn't touch the case because the math didn't add up, then I'd have to stop looking at the math and start looking at the people. I took a week off work. I told my boss I had family business to settle, which was a polite way of saying I was going to spend 16 hours a day digging through the digital and physical trash of the people who stole my dad's final years. My younger sister stayed at my house, and we turned the dining room table into a war room. We had property tax records, social media screenshots, and a stack of bank statements from 10 years ago that my dad had stashed in his old fire-safe box. "Look at this," my younger sister said, sliding a printout across the table. It was a photo from my half-sister's Instagram from 3 years ago. She was standing in a high-end kitchen, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "New beginnings. Finally getting the space we deserve." I looked at the date. It was the exact week the deed to our childhood home was signed over to the second wife. They weren't even hiding it. They were celebrating the theft while my dad was likely sitting in the other room, being told that the kids were too busy to visit. But then, I found the crack in the foundation. I went to the county recorder's office and pulled the original filing for the $10 deed transfer. Usually, these things are notarized by a bank official or a neutral third party. But the notary on this document wasn't a stranger. It was a name I recognized from the letters in the tool crate. It was the second wife's cousin. In the state of Ohio, a notary is supposed to be impartial. They are supposed to verify that the person signing is doing so of their own free will and that they aren't under duress. But if the notary is a family member of the person getting the gift, the whole thing starts to smell like a setup. I decided to pay a visit to that cousin's office, and I didn't go as a grieving son. I went as a man looking for a signature that shouldn't exist. I found the cousin working at a small insurance agency on the outskirts of town. I walked in, my work boots loud on the cheap linoleum. He was a small man with nervous eyes and a desk covered in half-empty soda cans. "Can I help you?" he asked, not looking up. "I'm Shannon," I said, leaning over his desk until he had to meet my eyes. "I'm looking at a deed you notarized 5 years ago for my father. The one where he gave his $500,000 house away for $10. The man's face went from pale to ghostly white in 3 seconds. He started shuffling papers, his hands trembling. I remember that. Your father was fine. He knew what he was doing." "Did he?" I asked, my voice a low, dangerous rumble. "Because the nurse at the hospital says he was confused as far back as 6 years ago. And I noticed you're Tiffany's first cousin. Did you explain to him that he was signing away his children's future? Or did you just point to the X while she stood over him?" "I don't have to talk to you," he stammered, standing up. "The document is legal. It's filed." "It's filed," I said. "But a judge might find it real interesting that a family member notarized a $500,000 gift to another family member while the owner was on heart medication. That's called self-dealing. And in this state, it can cost you your license, maybe even some jail time." I saw the beads of sweat on his forehead. He knew he'd crossed a line for his cousin. He was the inside man who made the robbery look legal on paper. If a family member used their professional license to help steal your inheritance, would you report them to the state board or handle it privately? Tell me your move in the comments and share this to warn others about self-dealing notaries. I walked out of there knowing I had a lever, but I still didn't have the money. I needed to know about the $125,000 in investments. That was the money my dad had specifically told us was for the grandkids' college. I went to the bank where he had his accounts for 40 years. I knew the branch manager, a woman who had worked there since I was in high school. She liked my dad. He used to bring the teller's donuts every Friday. "Shannon," she said, pulling me into her office, "I shouldn't be telling you this, but I was there the day that account was changed." "What happened?" I asked. "He didn't come in alone," she whispered. "Tiffany and her daughter brought him in. He looked tired. He didn't say much. Tiffany did all the talking. She said they wanted to consolidate accounts for easier management as his health declined. When I asked your dad if he was sure, he just looked at her. She patted his hand and said, "It's for the best, honey. Remember what the kid said? They don't have time to help with the bills." He believed her, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical weight. He looked heartbroken. He signed the papers with a shaky hand. "After they left, I almost called you, but your names had been removed from the emergency contact list. I had no way to reach you." They had systematically pruned every branch of his support system. They had replaced his children with themselves. And they had used his own love for us against him, making him think his silence was our choice, not theirs. I realized that while they were busy spending the money, they had left behind one digital trail they forgot to scrub. And it was sitting on my dad's old laptop that I had managed to grab from the garage. I spent the next 3 days in my basement, hunched over my dad's old laptop. It was a slow, clunky machine filled with engineering diagrams and old photos. But then I looked at the deleted items folder in his email. There were dozens of them. Emails from me. Emails from my sisters. "Dad, why aren't you picking up? Dad, we're coming over this Saturday. Hope you're feeling better." Every single one of them had been opened and moved to the trash within minutes of being sent. They were sent from our addresses, but they were never seen by his eyes. And then I saw the sent folder. There were emails sent from my dad's account to us. Emails I had never received. "Don't bother coming this weekend," one read. "I'm tired of the drama. Tiffany is the only one who cares for me. Please stop calling." My blood ran cold. They hadn't just deleted our messages, they had written fake replies to us and then deleted them from the sent folder, so there was no record. But they weren't tech savvy enough to know about the recover deleted items bin. They had manufactured a fight that never happened. They had played both sides of the board, making us think he was angry and making him think we were indifferent. It was the perfect crime. It was a digital assassination of a family. I sat there in the dark of my basement, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in my eyes. I had the letters, I had the nurse's testimony, I had the bank manager's account of the shaky signature. And now, I had the proof of the intercepted emails. The lawyers said it wasn't worth the fight because they were looking at a ledger. But I wasn't looking at a ledger anymore. I was looking at a crime scene. There is a moment in every storm where the wind just stops a hollow, ringing quiet before the sky truly opens up. Sitting in my basement, staring at those deleted emails, I felt that quiet. I wasn't just a grieving son anymore. I was a witness. I called my sisters. We didn't meet in a truck this time. We met in my dining room, the laptop open like a glowing altar of proof. When they saw the sent folder, the fake messages written in my dad's name, telling us to stay away, my younger sister didn't cry. She went cold. She looked like she could walk through a brick wall. "We aren't going back to the lawyers," I said, my voice steady. "The lawyers want a paper trail that leads to a bank account. I have a paper trail that leads to a prison cell." We didn't call the cops. We went to the one place where Tiffany and her daughter felt truly safe, their reputation. The condo association was having their annual spring gala that Saturday. I knew because I'd seen the flyer on the gate when we were lurking in the shadows. It was a high society event, catered appetizers, expensive wine, and all the important people in town gathered to talk about their portfolios. The second wife was on the welcoming committee. She loved being the grand lady of the development, the wealthy widow who had bravely moved on from her husband's passing. We didn't show up with a lawyer. We showed up with a projector and a thumb drive that held 5 years of stolen life. We arrived at the gala just as the sun was setting over the manicured lake. I wore my best suit, the one I'd bought for a wedding I never got to attend, because I was too busy. My sisters were dressed in black, looking like the funeral we were never allowed to have. We walked into the clubhouse. The air smelled of expensive perfume and shrimp cocktail. She saw us almost immediately. Her face didn't crumble, it hardened. She glided toward us, a glass of Chardonnay in her hand, her daughter trailing behind like a silent shadow. "Shannon," she whispered, her voice a sharp hiss. "This is a private event. You have no business here. If you're here for more money, the lawyers have already spoken." "I'm not here for money," I said, loud enough for the couple at the nearest table to turn around. "I'm here to return some property." I walked over to the AV booth. The young guy running the music looked at me, confused. I didn't give him a choice. I handed him a $20 bill and the thumb drive. "Play the folder labeled Evidence," I told him. The music stopped. The massive screen at the front of the room, the one meant for the slideshow of the new pool construction, flickered to life. It wasn't a movie, it was a screenshot. A side-by-side of an email I had sent to my dad and the deleted timestamp from his account just 3 minutes later. Then, a recording of the bank manager's voice. I'd gone back with a recorder describing how my dad looked confused and tired when he signed away the house. The room went dead silent. You could hear the bubbles in the champagne glasses. "What is this?" someone from the back shouted. I stepped onto the small stage. "This is how you buy a condo in this neighborhood," I said, my voice projecting through the speakers. "You isolate a dying man. You tell him his children hate him. You delete their messages of love while he's staring at a hospital door. And you have your own cousin notarize a deed while the owner is on heavy heart medication." Tiffany tried to scream, her face turning a deep, ugly purple. "He wanted this. He loved me." "He loved his children," my younger sister shouted from the floor. "And you made him die thinking we didn't love him back. That's not a marriage. That's a heist." If you were in that room and saw the evidence of a family being destroyed, would you stand by the widow or the children? Be honest in the comments. And if you believe justice should be public, subscribe to join our circle of truth. The status flip was instantaneous. In a community like that, reputation is the only currency that matters. The neighbors, the people Tiffany had been trying so hard to impress, started backing away from her like she was radioactive. Her daughter tried to pull her away, but it was too late. The grand lady was gone. In her place stood a woman caught with her hand in the grave. The cousin, the insurance agent, who notarized the deed, was fired 48 hours later after the insurance board received a copy of my digital file. The State Notary Commission opened an investigation that ended with a permanent revocation of his license. But the real karma wasn't a court date. It was the condo. Because of the self-dealing notary and the evidence of undue influence, we were finally able to get a judge to place a lis pendens on the property. That's a legal lock. It meant they couldn't sell the condo. They couldn't borrow against it. They were trapped in that luxury cage with a mounting legal battle that would eventually eat every cent of that $155,000 in legal fees. They had the leather recliner, they had the designer drapes, but they didn't have the peace. 6 months later, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize, and it was a voice from the one person I thought I'd never hear from again. It was the nurse from the hospital. She had found something tucked into the back of a drawer in the room my dad had stayed in. It was a small, hand-drawn map on a piece of hospital stationery. I drove out to the house on Elm Street, the one the stranger now lived in. I asked him if I could look at the old oak tree in the backyard. He let me. Buried at the base of that tree, in a waterproof metal box, was the real will. The one he had written by hand, in his own perfect engineering script. Just weeks before the silence truly took over, he had suspected. He had known they were watching his digital life. So he went back to the old ways. "To my children," it read. "If you are reading this, it means the walls worked for a while. But I know you didn't stop calling. I know you didn't forget me. I am hiding this here because it's the only place they can't reach. I love you. The house is yours. Always." We took that handwritten will to a fourth lawyer, a real fighter this time. With the self-dealing notary already disgraced and the intentional isolation proven by the deleted emails, the joint tenancy was challenged. It took 2 years, but we didn't care about the time. We won. We didn't get the house back, it belonged to the stranger now, but we got the value of it. The condo was ordered to be sold, and the proceeds were split between the three of us. Tiffany and her daughter were left with exactly what they brought into my dad's life. Nothing but their own greed. But the money didn't feel like victory. The victory happened on a quiet Tuesday in August, 1 year after we found the grave. My sisters and I went back to the cemetery. We didn't bring flowers this time. We brought a new headstone. We replaced the one my second dad had put there, the one that only listed her and her daughter. The new stone was larger, made of the same gray granite as our mom's. It listed all of us. It listed his years of service as an engineer. And at the bottom, in small, precise letters, it said, "A father who was never forgotten, and children who never stopped calling." I sat on the grass and felt the sun on my back. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel the need to check my phone for a voicemail. I didn't feel the weight of a secret. The second wife still lives in town, I hear. She works a retail job now, far away from the gated communities and the spring galas. People don't look at her like a grand lady anymore. They look at her like a cautionary tale. And as for me, I still have my dad's old spirit level in my truck. Every time I use it, I think about what he taught me. If the foundation is wrong, the house will lean. But if you have the courage to dig deep enough, you can always find the truth buried beneath the surface. Growing up doesn't mean moving on from your parents. It means becoming the person they raised you to be. And sometimes, that means being the person who refuses to let the silence win. At the end of the day, a will is just words on paper. But a family is a foundation that no amount of greed can ever fully wash away. Wealth is more than money in a bank. It's the time you're allowed to spend with the people you love. When someone steals that time, they've stolen something that can never be paid back. A predator doesn't always come with a weapon. Sometimes they come with a smile and a glass of water. They don't steal your life all at once. They steal it one deleted email and one quiet lie at a time. The legal system is built to protect paper, not people. A will can be perfect on the page, but it's useless if the person holding the pen is being kept in the dark by the people they trust. Justice isn't always about the money you recover, it's about the truth you restore. You can steal a man's home, you can steal his bank account, but you can never truly steal a legacy that was built on love. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.